She told me, "You'll never understand the kind of lifestyle I actually deserve," during an argument about money, status, and ambition in front of her friends. I stayed completely calm and quietly left. Months later, she watched those same friends congratulate me online after my interview started trending across every major business platform overnight. "You'll never understand the kind of lifestyle I actually deserve." She said it like she'd been saving it, like it had been sitting behind her teeth for months, just waiting for the right audience. Her friends went completely quiet. Not the kind of quiet where people are uncomfortable, the kind where they're watching, waiting to see what you'll do next. It wasn't really about money anymore. It was about something older than that. Something she decided about me a long time ago and had finally found the courage to say out loud. I looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then I grabbed my jacket off the back of the chair, said nothing, and walked out of that rooftop restaurant into the cold November air. No speech, no scene, no dramatic exit line. Just gone. Months later, those same friends would be reposting my interview, tagging each other, leaving fire emojis in the comments like they'd always believed in me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Not just because of what she said, because of how I felt walking out into that night air. I felt relieved, and that scared me more than anything she could have said, because if losing her felt like relief, it meant I'd been suffocating for a long time without ever admitting it to myself. It meant I'd been pretending something was fine when it had been broken for months. I kept walking for 3 blocks before I stopped and stood on a corner in Midtown, taxis cutting past me, people spilling out of bars, the city completely indifferent to what had just happened. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I just stood there. And for the first time in almost 2 years, I felt like I could actually breathe. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. Her name was Monica. We'd been together for 22 months when that night happened, long enough to have inside jokes and routines and a drawer at each other's apartments. Long enough that I'd started using the word we without even thinking about it. She was 29. I was 31. She worked in luxury brand consulting, the kind of job where you spend your days advising fashion houses and high-end hospitality groups on positioning and image. She was good at it. She understood aesthetics the way some people understand numbers. Instinctively, without effort. Her world was beautiful, polished, expensive. Mine was messier. I was building a media consultancy from a shared office space in Flatiron. Not a startup in the flashy, venture-backed sense. More like a slow grind. Content strategy, brand voice development, a few mid-sized clients who trusted me, and one larger opportunity I'd been quietly working toward for the better part of a year. On paper, we didn't make a lot of sense. In practice, we made even less. But when you're in it, you find reasons to ignore the parts that don't fit. That's what I did. For 22 months. The first sign came about 4 months in. We were at a gallery opening in Chelsea, the kind of event where the art is secondary and the networking is the real exhibit. Monica had invited me. I wore a clean blazer, dark jeans, dress shoes. I thought I looked fine. She pulled me aside near the bar and said, quietly, "Next time, maybe the blazer with the gray lining. This one looks a little off." I looked down at my jacket. "It's fine," I said. "I know," she said. "I just want you to look your best." She smiled and turned back to her friends. At the time, I ignored it. 2 months later, we were at a dinner with her colleague Vanessa and Vanessa's boyfriend Preston, who worked in private equity and wore the kind of watch that exists specifically to tell you he wore that kind of watch. Somewhere between the entree and dessert, Monica started talking about a client event she'd organized at the peninsula. Preston said something about his firm's annual retreat in the Maldives. Monica laughed in a way I'd never heard her laugh with me. Easy, impressed, a little breathless. She glanced at me once during that conversation. Just once. And the look wasn't pride. It was something closer to apology. I kept eating. That should have been my warning. By month 8, I noticed she'd stopped mentioning me on her social media. Not actively removed. Just absent. She'd post from dinners we were at together. Photos from parties we attended side by side. But I was never in them. Or if I happened to appear in the background, she'd crop or angle the shot, so I wasn't visible. I asked her about it once. "I just like keeping my personal life private," she said. "You post Vanessa constantly. Vanessa and I have been friends for 6 years." She said it like that was an explanation. I didn't push it. Looking back, that silence on my end said more about where I was mentally than anything else. I was deep in a proposal for what could become my biggest client, a a mid-sized consumer brand that was trying to reposition itself digitally. I was working until 2 in the morning most nights. I was tired and I didn't have the energy to fight about Instagram. So I let it go. That's the thing about red flags when you're exhausted. They just look like fabric. Month 10. Her friend group started feeling like a test I didn't know I was taking. There was Rachel, who worked in fashion PR and had the ability to make a compliment sound like a demotion. There was Qley, who asked every man she met what he did for work within the first 30 seconds and then adjusted her smile based on the answer. There was Danielle, who was quieter but watched everything. She was the most dangerous one. She didn't say much, but she remembered everything. And then there was Adrian, who wasn't dating anyone in the group but was always around. He was in finance, tall, aggressively successful in that loud, visible way that certain men perform their success. He talked about his deals the way other people talk about the weather. Casually. Constantly. Monica lit up around Adrian. Not romantically, I don't think. But intellectually. Aspirationally. He represented something she was reaching for, and she couldn't entirely hide it. I didn't confront her about it. There was something I hadn't figured out yet about what exactly I was afraid of losing. Her, or the idea of her. The birthday dinner was month 14. It was her birthday. I'd booked a reservation at a restaurant in the West Village she'd been wanting to try for months. Bought her something I'd put actual thought into. A first edition copy of a book she'd mentioned exactly once. In passing, 3 months earlier. I'd spent 2 weeks tracking it down. 6 of her friends came. I paid for the dinner. At some point, Preston started talking about a bonus he'd received. A number that made Rachel cover her mouth and say, "Shut up." In that way, that means please keep going. Monica turned to me and said, "What was your best month this year?" The table got a little quieter. Not dramatic. Just attentive. I said, "We had a solid Q3. No, I mean like, your personal best month. Earnings-wise." I looked at her. "Monica." "What?" "I'm just curious. This is your birthday dinner." She shrugged and turned back to Preston like I'd said something slightly boring. Rachel caught my eye across the table for just a second. Not with sympathy. With something closer to confirmation. Like I'd just proven something she already believed. I didn't make a scene. I refilled her glass and asked Qley about a project she'd mentioned. But I felt it. Something had shifted. And I understood then that the dinner wasn't really a celebration. It was a comparison. And I had come up short. The larger client opportunity one mentioned, the one I'd been quietly working toward, was with a company called Caldwell Media Group. They were a mid-sized media conglomerate that had been struggling with their digital brand identity for 3 years. Good content, bad strategy. They'd cycled through 2 larger agencies without meaningful results and were now looking at smaller, more focused consultancies. My contact there was a man named Ethan Cross, a VP of brand development who'd heard about my work through a mutual connection. We'd had 2 preliminary conversations. He liked my thinking. He told me there would be a formal pitch process involving 4 firms. That pitch was 9 months away when the birthday dinner happened. 9 months is a long time when you're also trying to hold a relationship together. I kept my head down. I worked. I said less about it than I should have. Looking back, I understand now why I didn't talk to Monica about it much. Every time I tried to explain what I was building, what it could become, I felt her interest evaporate in real time. Not cruelly, just honestly. She wasn't interested in potential. She was interested in results. Invisible, present, right now results. And right now, I was a guy splitting a shared office with 2 other small firms, working on a pitch that might not even go anywhere. That's not a story people lean forward for. So I stopped telling it. Month 18. There was a networking event in the private dining room of a hotel in Midtown. Monica's firm was a co-sponsor. It was upscale, quiet, the kind of room where people exchange cards and disguise ambition as casual conversation. She introduced me to her colleagues as a consultant, not a founder, not a strategist, not even by my company name, just consultant, like I was temporary, like I was background. One of her senior partners, a sharp woman named Teresa in her late 40s, asked what I specialized in. I told her, brand narrative development, specifically for companies in transition. I gave her a 2-sentence breakdown of the Caldwell pitch framework I'd been refining. She looked actually interested. "That's a very specific niche," she said. "Smart positioning." I thanked her. Monica changed the subject. Afterward, in the cab home, she was quiet. "Your boss seemed to like what I was describing," I said. She was being polite. "I don't think so. She's polite to everyone. That's literally her job." I looked out the window. Okay. She didn't say anything else. Neither did I. That should have been the moment. But I had 6 months left on the Caldwell timeline, and I wasn't ready to let go of anything yet. I don't know exactly when Monica decided I wasn't enough. I think it was a gradual thing, like water finding cracks. Slow, quiet, and then suddenly the whole structure is compromised. There were small things I noticed in those final months. The way she'd check her phone when I was mid-sentence. The way she'd decline to tell her friends what I was working on, not with a lie, just with a pivot. "He's doing his thing," she'd say, vaguely, like my work was a phase. The way she started describing her ideal future more frequently. The apartment she wanted. The neighborhood. The travel schedule. The lifestyle she'd pictured for herself. None of it included a guy still in a shared office working a pitch that hadn't landed yet. She never said that directly, but she was saying it constantly. I heard every word. The night at the rooftop restaurant was month 22. It was mid-November, cold enough that the outdoor heaters were running. The restaurant had glass panels to block the wind. It felt warm and lit and elevated in that way expensive things always feel. Her entire friend group was there. Rachel, Qley, Danielle, Vanessa. Adrian had brought a friend, another finance type named Calvin who I'd never met. Preston was there with Vanessa. It started as a normal dinner. Then somehow the conversation turned to a real estate project Adrian was involved in. A development in Brooklyn, high-end residential. He was talking about the kind of returns they were projecting, and Calvin was nodding along, adding figures. And the table was engaged the way tables get when money enters the room. Monica was listening intently. Then Rachel said, almost offhandedly, "What about you? Anything exciting happening?" She was asking me. And before I could answer, Monica said, "He's still building." The way she said it. Still. Like it was a condition. Like patience had expired. Calvin asked what I was building. I gave the short version. The Caldwell pitch. Brand consultancy. Media strategy. He nodded, not impolitely, but with that specific nod that means he'd already moved on internally. Adrian said, "That's cool, man. Service business is tough to scale." "It can be," I said. "Depends on how you structure it." For sure, for sure." He turned back to Preston. Monica was looking at me. Not angrily. Something quieter than anger. Embarrassed. She was embarrassed by me. And that look, that specific look, finally cracked something open inside me that I'd been keeping carefully sealed. I said quietly, "Everything okay?" She looked at me for a moment. Then she said it. "I just think sometimes you don't understand the kind of lifestyle I actually deserve." Someone set down a fork. Adrian looked at his glass. Rachel went very still. The heat lamps hummed. I looked at Monica. Her expression said she hadn't entirely expected herself to say it either. But she didn't take it back. I nodded once. I stood up, picked up my jacket. "Okay," I said. That was all. I put on my jacket, walked to the elevator, rode down 16 floors, walked through the lobby, and stepped into the November cold. Behind me, I heard nothing. That was the last time I would ever walk away from Monica. And the last time, for a long time, that any of them would see me. I'm going to be honest about the weeks that followed. They weren't cinematic. There was no training montage. No sudden clarity. No moment where I stood at the window with coffee and had a revelation about my purpose. There were a lot of quiet mornings. There was grief, though I didn't name it that at first. I called it tiredness. I called it focus. I told myself I was relieved, which was true, but relief and grief can exist in the same space. I know that now. I deleted her contact from my phone. Not dramatically. Just one morning when I woke up and thought, I don't need that there. I stopped going to the social circles we'd shared. Not because I was hiding. Because I genuinely had nothing to say to those people. What would we talk about? The version of me they knew was already gone. I spent December mostly alone. I worked. I refined the Caldwell pitch until I knew it the way you know a road you've driven 100 times. Not just the route, the specific curve before the left turn, the pothole 2 blocks from the exit. I slept more than I had in a year. I stopped apologizing for the size of my office. The pitch happened in mid-January. 4 firms. Sequential presentations. I was third. I walked in with 2 colleagues, a clean deck, and 9 months of thinking I hadn't shown anyone. Ethan Cross sat at the head of the table with 3 senior people from their brand team. I spoke for 42 minutes. I didn't read from slides. I knew the material well enough to talk about it the way you talk about something you understand. Not performed. Not sold. Just honest. When I finished, Ethan asked 2 questions. Good questions. Specific ones. The kind that meant he'd been listening. I answered them without hesitation. After the 3rd question, he looked at his team. Something passed between them. I walked out not knowing. They called 3 weeks later. Ethan Cross personally. "We'd like to move forward with your firm," he said. "Your approach to the repositioning framework was different from what the others presented. It felt more grounded." I thanked him. I sat in my car in a parking garage for 10 minutes before I went back inside. Not celebrating, just sitting with it. This was the thing I hadn't told Monica about. The thing I'd been protecting with silence because I couldn't bear to have it dismissed again. And now it was real. Now it was mine. The work with Caldwell started in March. It was demanding in ways I hadn't entirely anticipated. They were a larger client than I'd handled before, with internal politics and competing priorities and a leadership team that changed its mind regularly. I had to be steadier than I felt sometimes. But I was also free in a way I hadn't been in years. There was no one at home whose expression I was monitoring. No dinner where I had to measure what I said against how it would land. No relationship I was quietly managing while also trying to build something real. I could just work. That sounds simple. It wasn't. Not at first. But I got used to it. And slowly, without announcing itself, the work started to gain weight. Caldwell's repositioning began showing results in Q2. Their engagement metrics shifted. Their digital identity cohered in a way that their previous agencies hadn't managed. Internal stakeholders who had been skeptical began citing the framework in meetings. Ethan became a real advocate. He introduced me to 2 other companies in his network. I brought on 2 additional consultants to handle the volume. The shared office in Flatiron became a dedicated floor. None of this was overnight. None of it was dramatic. It was slow, incremental, and invisible to anyone who wasn't watching closely. Which is exactly the point. In June, Ethan Cross mentioned a business podcast he'd been asked to appear on. He'd heard the host, a media journalist named Sophie Ward, was specifically looking for a case study on mid-market brand repositioning. "You should do it," he said. "This is your story as much as mine." "I'll think about it," I said. I thought about it for 2 days and said yes. Sophie Ward had a podcast that sat at a modest but respected place in the media and business space. Not massive, but credible. The kind of audience that was small and specific in a way that actually matters. We recorded the episode in late June. It was a conversation, not an interview in the traditional sense. Sophie had done her research and she asked questions that required actual thought. We talked about the Caldwell project, the repositioning methodology, the challenge of building a consultancy without outside funding, the years of smaller work that most people don't see. She asked about mindset. I told her about the period after the pitch. The quiet months. The choice to focus entirely rather than divide my attention. I didn't mention Monica, but I was thinking about her. The episode went up in July. I didn't check the numbers for the first 2 weeks. I was deep in a new project, and I genuinely didn't have the bandwidth to refresh analytics obsessively. Then my colleague Marcus sent me a message. "Have you seen the numbers on the podcast?" I hadn't. The episode had been shared by 2 reasonably large business accounts on LinkedIn. Then a few more. Sophie's audience was smaller, but engaged, and engaged audiences shared differently than passive ones. The episode spread laterally rather than vertically, not through one massive share, but through dozens of smaller ones, each carrying it into a slightly different professional circle. By the 3rd week of July, the episode had been played more times than Sophie's last 6 episodes combined. She messaged me on a Thursday. "This is extraordinary. I've never seen an episode move like this. Would you be open to a video follow-up?" I told her I'd think about it. Marcus came into my office that afternoon and put his laptop in front of me. The LinkedIn comments were running 300 deep. People I'd never met were describing the episode as the most honest conversation about building something real they'd heard. A major business publication had shared a clip. I sat with that for a long time. The video interview happened in August. Sophie's team set it up properly this time. A camera crew, proper lighting, a location that looked intentional rather than improvised. They asked me to wear what I'd wear to a real client meeting. I wore what I always wear. We talked for 90 minutes. They cut it to 40 and posted it the following Monday. By Wednesday morning, it had been shared across every major business platform overnight. I found out about Monica through Marcus, who hadn't known we dated and mentioned it as casual information. "That girl Monica, the one from the branding firm, she was in my DMs asking about you." "What did she say?" "Just said she'd seen the interview. Asked how you were doing. Said you 2 were old friends." "Old friends?" I looked at my phone. There was a message request from her on Instagram. I saw the preview. "Hey, I saw the interview. I'm really happy for you. I always knew you had something like this in you." I put my phone face down on the desk. She always knew. The same woman who said I'd never understand the kind of lifestyle she deserved. who looked embarrassed sitting next to me at a rooftop dinner, who introduced me as just a consultant to people she wanted to impress. She always knew. I didn't respond. Not out of anger. There just wasn't anything to say. Here's the thing about that period I want to be honest about. I never told anyone how bad the earlier years were. Not the financial pressure of building without investment. Not the months where I questioned whether the whole framework I'd built my methodology on was even right. Not the specific pain of presenting to rooms where I could feel them deciding I wasn't worth their full attention before I'd finished my second sentence. I never told anyone about the fear. That's the thing that doesn't make it into the narrative afterward. The fear. The nights where I lay awake not with ambition, but with dread. Wondering if I was wrong about myself. Wondering if the people who doubted me were seeing something I couldn't. Monica never saw that either. Not because I hid it intentionally. Because she'd stopped looking. In September, a business magazine reached out for a profile. Not a small one. I told my team and went for a walk around the block. Marcus was standing outside when I came back. "You ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready," I said. It was the first time I'd said something like that without wondering if it was true. The article ran in October. It was 8 pages in the print edition. For 1,000 words online. They used a photo from the video interview. Me mid-sentence, looking directly ahead, the posture of someone not performing for the camera. The headline called the methodology quietly disruptive. I like that. Quiet was the operating principle from the beginning. I just hadn't known it was a strategy. I thought it was a limitation. Turns out that's the same thing sometimes, until it isn't. The night the article went live, I was at my desk finishing a proposal. My phone started moving with notifications, and I turned it over and kept working. There were messages from old colleagues I hadn't heard from in years. There were LinkedIn connection requests from people whose names I recognized from conferences I'd attended when I was no one. There were comments on the interview repost from accounts with the blue check mark. And somewhere in that stream, without me seeing it directly, there were her friends. Rachel had shared the article with a single comment. "This is incredible." Qley had tagged Danielle in the video and written, "Remember him?" Vanessa had shared the podcast episode with a caption about supporting people in your circle who are building real things. I was not in their circle. I had never been in their circle. But that's not what the caption said. I saw Monica once after everything. Not planned. Late October, a coffee shop in the Flatiron District, 3 blocks from my office. I came in on a Tuesday morning to take a call that I needed to step out for. Found a corner table, ordered an Americano. She was already there, sitting with Danielle, a laptop open, looking like she was in the middle of something. She saw me at almost exactly the same moment I saw her. I kept walking to the counter. Got my coffee. Turned around. She was standing. Danielle stayed seated, looking at her phone with the careful focus of someone who has decided not to be involved in this specific moment. Monica crossed the room. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She looked, I don't know what the right word is. Not sad exactly. More like someone who has worked something out in their head and isn't sure the answer is what they wanted. "I sent you a message," she said. "I know. I meant it. About being happy for you. I believe you." She paused. "I was wrong," she said. "About what I said. That night." I looked at her. She waited. I think she expected something. A response that matched the weight of what she was offering. Some version of "it's okay," or "I know," or even something sharp. Something that would tell her she'd hurt me badly enough that I'd been thinking about her. "Thank you for saying that," I said. That was all. Her expression changed. Not dramatically. Just settled into something. Like she'd been holding a question, and the answer was smaller than the question deserved. "You look good," she said. "Take care, Monica." I picked up my coffee, walked back to my corner table, and took my call. She was gone when I finished 20 minutes later. Danielle too. I thought about that conversation for a while afterward. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction either. Just with something like clarity. There's a version of this story where I held onto the rooftop night like a wound. Where Monica's words played on a loop during those quiet months. Where everything I built was quietly addressed to her. That's not what happened. The truth is simpler and less cinematic. I stopped caring about Monica long before she said what she said that night. That's why her words only stung for a moment. I had already started the process of letting go without calling it that. The breakup didn't save me. The work saved me. The decision to stop performing for an audience that had already decided who I was, that saved me. What the money and the article and the interview did was make visible something that had already been true for a long time. That's the part people miss when they look at the outcome. The outcome isn't the moment. The moment was months earlier. Quiet. Unremarkable. It was somewhere around 2 in the morning on a Wednesday in January, sitting at my desk with the Caldwell deck open, everyone else asleep, the city humming outside my window, and me finally completely certain that I knew exactly what I was doing and why. No one saw that moment. No one shared it. No one put a caption on it. But that was the real thing. Everything else was just the echo. The profile ran a second time in the magazine's year-end digital issue. My firm closed 4 new clients in Q4. Marcus hired 2 more people. We moved to a proper office. Not shared, not borrowed, not aspirational. Ours. I stood in the empty space the day before we moved in. Just stood there in the quiet. It smelled like fresh paint and new carpet and the particular silence of a room that hasn't been used yet. I thought about the gallery in Chelsea. The blazer she didn't like. I thought about the birthday dinner. The question she asked about my best earning month while her friends were watching. I thought about the way she looked at me from across a room full of people she respected, and I wasn't one of them. I stood in my empty office, and I felt exactly nothing about any of it. Not triumph, not vindication, just presence. Just here, now this. Someone sent me a screenshot eventually. Monica had posted something on her Instagram. A quote about recognizing people's potential before it becomes obvious. Something about seeing what others miss. The caption said she was thinking about the people in her life who were building quietly. There were 340 likes. Danielle had commented a red heart. Rachel had commented, "This." I looked at the screenshot for a moment, put my phone down, went back to work. I got a message in November from Sophie Ward, the journalist. She wanted to do a follow-up episode. The original had crossed a number that her network considered a milestone. She asked if I was open to talking about the personal side of the building years. "What do you mean?" I wrote back. "The cost," she said. "Everyone wants to hear about the success framework. I want to talk about what it actually takes. What you lose. What you let go of." I thought about it for 2 days. Then I wrote back. "Let's do it." There's one thing I've never said publicly that I'll say here. The hardest part wasn't the money. It wasn't the uncertain months or the pitch or the fear that I'd built something that would never quite make it to the surface. The hardest part was staying quiet. Not quiet like silent. Quiet like not explaining yourself to people who've already made up their mind. Quiet like working in a direction you believe in without the validation of someone watching and saying, "Yes, keep going. This is real." Quiet like sitting across from someone you love or thought you loved and knowing they see someone lesser than you are and choosing, still, not to convince them otherwise. That kind of quiet is the real work. Nobody writes about that part. There's no interview clip for it. No caption. Just the long, private effort of becoming something before anyone else can see it. Monica never reached out again after the coffee shop. I didn't expect her to. The message she'd sent in July. "I always knew you had something like this in you." That was the goodbye she needed to give herself. I understood it. I even had some compassion for it. She was wrong about me in a specific way that cost her something. That has its own kind of weight. I don't think she was cruel. I think she was limited. Limited by a framework where worth was visible and present, where potential didn't count until it was converted, where the man in front of you was only as real as his last result. That framework isn't monstrous. It's just small. And I'd spent 22 months trying to fit inside something small. That part was on me. The year ended quietly. I took 3 days off between Christmas and New Year's. Actually off. No email, no calls, no deck open on a second monitor. I went to the coast, rented a small place, walked on the beach in the cold, which is a specific kind of peace that I recommend. I thought about the year, not the article, not the interview, not the numbers. I thought about January, the pitch, walking into that conference room knowing exactly what I had. I thought about that Wednesday night in February, sitting in the empty parking garage for 10 minutes after Ethan called. I thought about one specific afternoon in March when I had a bad week. Nothing catastrophic, but everything slightly wrong. And I sat in my car outside the office and just breathed for 10 minutes before going back in. Nobody tweets about the car moments. But the car moments are where the real decisions happen. I flew back to the city on New Year's Eve. Got in late. Took a cab from the airport. The city was lit and moving, already past midnight somewhere. I watched it through the window. 7 million people doing their thing. All of them with their own version of a rooftop night. Their own moment of being told what they weren't. Their own quiet morning after. The cab crossed into Manhattan. I looked at the skyline the way you look at something familiar that has somehow become new again. It wasn't the same city it had been a year ago. Or maybe it was. Maybe I was just finally seeing it the way it had always been. She looked at me in that coffee shop like she was trying to find the version of me she thought she understood. But that person had disappeared a long time ago. Somewhere around 2 in the morning on a Wednesday in January. Quietly. Without announcement. Without asking anyone's permission.